Hello my friends and welcome back to EVE Online with me, Mark from Dadex, and today we're going to have another look at the detail of the fitting screen, and today it's going to be up here this corner, the capacitor. Now we looked at this when we did the overview of the fitting screen in general, explaining what everything meant, and I'll link to that video at the end of this one and down below. But just as a quick recap right here, telling us our capacitor capacity, which is 270 gigajoules. Our recharge rate, that's the total number of seconds to fully recharge our capacitor, so 112.5 seconds, nearly 2 minutes. And this number down here is the excess capacitor recharge rate. That's basically with all the modules that are switched on currently running, that is how much faster we are recharging the capacitor than using the capacitor. 2.2 gigajoules a second, so we are cap stable because we have an excess recharge of 36.2%. So that's the fitting screen side of it. Now let's look at what we can do to increase the amount of capacitor we've got, reduce the amount of capacitor our modules use when they're running, increase our recharge rate. We also look at some modules and rigs, etc. that might have a negative effect on your capacitor too. Always worth bearing in mind. And right here we have the selection of bits and bobs. If you watched the last video about power grid and CPU and how to get more and use less, this is basically a very similar format. So up here we have implants. If you didn't watch that video or some of my other videos, you may not even realize that there are implants you can plug into your capsule that will increase the performance of your ship. There is more to implants than just the ones that improve your characteristics in relation to skill training. So let's have a quick look through these. First of all, we've got inherent Squire implant capacitor emission systems. A 1% reduction in the capacitor need of capacitor emission systems. We'll look at the capacitor emission system in just a little moment, but that's reducing the capacitor need for that. That's where you're transferring cap to another ship, obviously makes that more efficient. Next up, we got capacitor management. That's a straight increase to your capacitor capacity, in this case 1%. As I said in the previous episode, these all have various versions going up as high as 6%. The usual price for a 1% module of this type is about here. It's probably going to be between 600,000 and maybe 900,000 depending on how in demand they are. Once you start going up through the percentages, the 2% version 7 million, 3% 31 million, 4% nearly 100, 5% 170 million, and the 6% module over $500 million, if you can grab that quick. So that's how they work. They go into slots. So we have the attribute enhancers up here, which are the ones you're probably used to. They're the ones that come in the named sets, and the ones that we get even quite early on in the game in the form of these standard and limited ocular implants that are going to increase your characteristics on your alt. Now I have looked through all of them and I think I've got a reasonably, or at least a representative list here. If I miss anything out, please let me know down below in a comment. There's a lot of them to look at. Okay, the next implant we're going to look at, Squire capacitor systems operation, 1% reduction in capacitor recharge time. So you're going to refill your capacitor quicker. These three are in the engineering section of the implants. Then we've got some navigation implants here. First of all, the Rogue Afterburner, which is a duration bonus to afterburners. So basically, if your duration is lengthened on your modules, then they're cycling less often and therefore using capacitor less often. So increasing the duration of modules is a way of reducing their capacitor usage over time. Next up, fuel conservation. Just like the skill, it reduces the afterburner's capacitor need while it's running. And right next door we've got the high speed maneuvering version, which is the reduction in capacitor use of your micro warp drives and micro jump drives. So they're the implants. There may be another one buried in amongst them all somewhere, do let me know as I said, but they're the basic ones. So we've got the engineering implants that increase your capacitor amount, capacitor recharge, and reduce the capacitor use of capacitor transmitter modules. And then the navigation implants to reduce use on afterburners and micro warp drives and increase the duration of your afterburner modules, thus reducing capacitor usage. Right, that's the implants. Now let's look at some modules. First up, we've got a mid-slot module, the good old capacitor battery, which has two advantages for your capacitor, although one is situational. First up, the medium capacitor battery. We're looking at the medium module in this case, that obviously the numbers vary. It's a straight bonus to the amount of your capacitor, in this case 550 gigajoules. It's not a percentage, it's a flat increase. So it's going to be more effective on smaller ships. Its second advantage is you get a 22% resistance to capacitor warfare. That is you being neutered or people using Nosferatus on you, which we will look at because they're relevant to this section. PvE wise, on the 6 out of 10s we were running recently in the videos, obviously they had some very powerful nuke towers in there, which were probably the primary target on those sites because of the havoc they can wreak once they start sucking your capacitor dry. So that's going to reduce how much they can drain your capacitor by over a fifth, and it is increasing your capacitor also, so it's kind of a win-win if you're facing something that's going to try and nuke you. Next up, we've got a low slot module, the capacitor flux coil. This is a straight swap. You're going to get 20% less capacitor capacity, but it's going to recharge 36% quicker. So less base, quicker recharge. The capacitor power relay is going to increase your recharge rate by 20%. It's going to reduce your shield booster bonus. It's very specific. If you're running an active shield tank, you might want to think about using one of these because it's, yeah, you're going to get 20% more capacitor, you're going to lose 10% bonus. Overall, you're going to get more reps out of your ship, but the reduction in rep amount may be enough for you to die. So do think about this one carefully. And last, but by no means least, another mid-slot module, we've got the Cap Recharger 1. Does exactly what it says on the tin. It increases your capacitor recharge rate by 15%. Obviously, variants of these modules are available as we looked at in the modules video. In this case, we've got the compact recharger, and as with all of the non-base versions of modules, is going to actually do a better job as well as being easier to fit on your ship, and in many cases might actually be cheaper. Let's have a little look. Probably going to get proved wrong. So that's 187,000 for that one. For the base model, we're looking at 45,000. I take it all back. This is one of those instances, and there are a few, shield extenders are one of them, where the demand for that compact version means it is actually more expensive. Always worth checking on modules. Never use the Meta Zero one unless you've decided it is actually the one you want to use. Again, look at the modules video, linked at the end of this and down below if you want more information on that type of thing. These are the 4 passive modules that you can fit to your ship, 2 mid-slot, 2 low-slot. Next up, we have an active module, the medium capacitor booster in this case. They come again in different sizes, small, large, extra large, and different variations. The compact is the one I would usually use. Now, the capacitor booster is dependent on having charges in it to run. And the number on the cap booster is how much capacitor you will get back when that booster is used. So if you trigger the capacitor booster and it's loaded with 200s, each cycle is going to give you 200 back in your capacitor. You can check on the info screen, if you look at used with, what sizes can go in. Now it's going to be up to you, and it's going to be a little bit dependent on the size of your ship, whether you want the one that's going to give you 800 per cycle or the one that say gives you 200 per cycle. The difference is you can only load it with so many of each type. Now, as you can see, there are lots of different versions of the cap booster itself, so each one is going to give that amount of capacitor back. Why would you want the smaller one over a bigger one? It depends how you need to use the cap booster. 800s, you will only be able to load up one at a time, so that cycles, and then you've got to go into the reload. 400s, you might be able to fire one when you need it, wait. You've got a spare one to fire if you need it, or you can go into a reload. It's something you have to kind of look at in quite a tactical way of how you're going to need to be boosting your cap and which way is the best. The most important thing to note is the reason that there are Navy cap boosters. They give you exactly the same amount of capacitor. The difference is they are smaller. And because they are smaller, volume 3 cubic meters, because they are smaller, you can fit more of them in your cargo hold, which means you can reload your capacitor booster for longer. Now the difference is the Navy cap booster 100 is 3 cubic meters. If you go back to the regular version, it's 4 cubic meters. So for every 3 of these cap boosters you can hold in your cargo hold, you can carry 4 of the Navy version. That might seem insignificant. I can promise you it isn't. What it does result in is a vast price difference. So the regular one, 2100 ISK for a cap booster 100. We look at the Navy version, 34,000. So it's about 16 times the price for a Navy one, simply because you can fit more in your cargo hold and have more loaded in the module to reduce the reloads. And if we just have a look on the fitting screen, we can just demonstrate that. If we put cap booster 100s in this small compact cap booster, we can fit 3 of them in. If we take those out and put in Navy cap boosters, just as I said, we can fit 4 of them in. And obviously that reload time reduction is what makes the increased price worthwhile. Another thing to note is that the biggest cap booster we've got up here is a 200. Down here we can use a Navy cap booster 400 because of that size difference. So we can get one of those in there. What you need to really think about, and this is what I meant about a little bit of a tactical thought, is that's going to give us 400 gigajoules a cycle. Now our total capacitor is only 487. So we don't want to be wasting any of that 400 by firing it early. So this is going to give us 400 capacitor each time that triggers, which is every 12.8 seconds, as you can see there. That means to get the full use of that, because we don't want to waste any, we're going to have to let the capacitor get down to 87, then fire the cap booster. Now that may be cutting it a bit fine for yourself until you get a bit more experienced with messing about with active modules, with reload times to take into account. Or it simply might not need to go that low for the situation that you're in. So obviously if we load in the cap booster 200s, we've now got 2 of those in there. We can then let the capacitor, if we let the capacitor get down to half, it's also going to give me the option then of, do I just cycle the next one as appropriate, or have I got time to do a reload before I even need to think about using another cap booster? So do just check how the cap booster size you're using relates to your overall cap size. Before we move on, this month's giveaway skin is this splendid Gila scope syndication skin. Leave your comments down below, guys. Remember to leave your in-game name in the comments for a chance to win one of these. Next up, we've got these 3 modules over here. These are an energy neutralizer, an energy Nosferatu, and a remote capacitor transmitter. Now, very simply, the neutralizer is going to drain your opponent's capacitor. You're not going to gain anything from it. You're going to use 45 gigajoules per cycle. It's going to delete 50 gigajoules per cycle off of the target ship, provided of course you're in range, etc. But do just bear in mind that actually I'm going to admit, the very first time I ever flew a ship with neutralizers fitted, it was a Tristan. It's a very basic early game fit. And I went out and tried to nuke somebody and fired up both the nukes that were fitted to the ship and flattened my own capacitor before I had much of an effect on the other guy. So do go out and get used to them. You do have to manage these and use these. These are not something you can just switch on and get on with your day at all. Keep an eye on these. They're very heavy drain on your own capacitor. Next up, we've got the Nosferatu, the vampire, which, as it suggests, is going to steal capacitor from the target ship. Again, with targeting and range limitations, and you're going to get some benefit of that yourself. 30 points of capacitor every 5 seconds. I'm not sure why this is expressed in points rather than gigajoules. If you know, let me know in a comment. Something to note with Nosferatus is that your capacitor level has to be lower than the target's for you to get any benefit from that. One way of forcing the situation where you have less might be burning a micro warp drive or another really energy consuming module just for the sake of it, or over repping just to get your capacitor down so the Nosferatu effect will take place. We got straight kill his capacitor with the neutralizer, steal his capacitor with the Nosferatu, and last but by no means least, and we demonstrated these very well in a recent level 4 mission video, is the remote capacitor transmitter. You literally use your capacitor to send capacitor to a ship. And the amazing thing about these is that when they're fitted to a ship that has a bonus for cap transmission, such as an Osprey or an Aurora, they will give your friend a lot more cap than you are using. So in that video, the 2 Ospreys were keeping each other cap stable by making this profit on the cap they were transferring, and that can be done at a very long range. I'll link to that video down below. It's a very good demonstration of that power. Before we move on from modules completely, we're just going to look at these guys here. We've got, just to remind you, that any of the specific shield hardeners, i.e. EM, thermal, etc., their activation cost is 20 gigajoules. Multi-spectrum shield hardeners take twice as much capacitor to run. So another way of saving capacitor is to get rid of the multi-spectrum shield hardeners and put on specific hardeners for the damage that you need to face. That's a decision for yourself, but that's not something that I noticed for quite a long time. And obviously with the likes of these shield power relays, which boost their shield recharge rate time but reduce your capacitor recharge rate, the restrained version obviously is going to have less of a negative effect if you are using those modules. So just bear that stuff in mind. Rigs, well, we've got the standard kind of ones that we'd expect to find. We've got the capacitor control circuit, is going to recharge our capacitor 15% quicker. We've got the small semiconductor memory cell, which is going to give us 15% more base capacitor. Then we got some slightly different ones. We got the small egress port maximizer. That's actually going to reduce the capacitor need for your energy emission modules. So again, if you're transmitting capacitor and the ship is tailored for that, these rigs right here will boost the efficiency of the cap transfer, especially when you're transferring to each other, both taking advantage of those kind of rigs. And then a warning that, first of all, anything that increases the rate of fire of your weapons which are using capacitor, in this case energy turrets, if you're increasing the rate of fire, you're increasing how fast they're eating up your capacitor. Obviously that's most relevant with laser weapons, then the hybrid weapons, not such a big concern with the projectile weapons and the missiles. The small engine thermal shielding, it increases the duration of your afterburners and your micro warp drives. So again, by increasing the cycle time, it's reducing how much time is eating that chunk of capacitor for the next cycle. And exactly the same principle with the nanobot accelerator. It's going to make your armor rep a rep quicker, but it's going to be using the capacitor faster as a result. These are obviously not the only modules and rigs that may have some impact on your capacitor one way or another. Again, comment, remind me of anything I've forgotten, but I'm really just making sure you're aware to always check that you're not actually having a negative influence on your ship's overall fit by using one module or one rig over another. Right, last but not least, we've got skills. As you'd expect, most of the relevant skills are in the engineering section. We've got capacitor management, so that's 5% bonus to capacitor capacity. Capacitor system operations, that's increasing your shield recharge rate 5% per level. Capacitor emission systems, reduced capacitor need of the module itself, so again increasing that efficiency, particularly when you're swapping cap. But these are not the only ones. Let's have a little look around. In electronic systems, you will find that the skills relating to EWAR modules, such as these here, so that's your ECM, training that skill reduces by 5% the capacitor need for running the module. Same with your tackle, your propulsion jamming reduces capacitor use. Same with target painting, and same with weapons disruptors such as tracking disruptors, missile disruptors, etc. In gunnery, we have controlled bursts, a reduction by 5% of the capacitor need of weapons turrets per skill level. That is most relevant by far for Amar characters early game, especially when you're trying to get lasers onto a destroyer. Will certainly keep the guns firing longer. I've found that a very useful skill to get up to at least level 4 early on as an alpha, an Amar alpha, just so you can keep those guns burning long enough to kill a clone soldier, basically. Remote armor repair systems and shield systems will both get reductions in capacitor use for training up their skill, as with hull repair. And the repair system skill itself reduces the cycle time, which will be more cap intensive. Obviously you're actually giving out more reps, so that's probably something you want to be doing, but again that will impact on your capacitor in a secondary way. And in navigation we have some relevant skills here. Afterburner skill is a reduction in afterburner duration and 10% reduction in the afterburner use per cycle. High-speed maneuvering, these names match up with those implants we looked at earlier, is going to be a 5% reduction to your micro warp drive capacitor usage amount. Warp drive operation reduces by 10% per level the amount of capacitor needed to get into warp. I've not found that to be anything like the issue that it used to be. I'm sure that's been changed. I remember there being lots of times you might need to get out quickly and you didn't have enough capacitor. I can't remember the last time I found that to be an issue, but that skill is there. Fuel conservation is an additional 10% reduction in afterburner capacitor needs per skill level. This is a skill alphas cannot train, and it is the reason that when I switched the passive tank Gila from an Amiga character to an alpha character, it did mess the fit up a little bit, certainly for the application I wanted to use it for, and I had to adjust it. If you're using fits and doing activities where you're just keeping your afterburner running the whole time, fuel conservation is going to be a very good friend of yours. And that, my friends, I think is all of them. Everything. Let me know if I've overlooked anything down below. Feel free. I love the fact that in making these videos and through your feedback, I've been reminded of things and have learnt things myself as I've gone along. It's a two-way street for sure, my friends. Anyway, we're going to leave it there. I'm going to catch you soon. It's time for some pews. I am going to do another video next week about navigation, drones, etc. on your fit screen and the stuff that can tweak those for you. I think I've got the main stuff out the way now. Next video, we're going to get a daredevil out and have a crash around in an alpha with a daredevil, just to show you how powerful those little ships can be when you've got the money to safely afford one, of course. But please, any comments down below. If you want to enter the Gila skin giveaway, please leave your in-game name in your comment. Like the video, please, if you have enjoyed it, because that does help the videos get circulated by the algorithm. Subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll leave it there. So take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and whether you fly safe or fly brave, for now, my friends, goodbye.